Hello, Internet. My name is Rafaël Rozendaal, and welcome to the exhibition Quiet, Calm Staring at Upstream Gallery online. Upstream is a gallery based in Amsterdam, and they have been working for a while with a lot of artists who use the internet as their primary medium. And it was logical that at this time of lockdown to think about an online exhibition. And this selection of works came out of my research. I've been researching screensavers for a long time, and the idea of infinity and movement and how scripting and the computer influence the idea of movement and how it's different from video. So I'll try to keep this brief, but at the same time, I want you to understand that the internet and the browser is a different material than all the others. So a lot of times people see online art and think of it as animation, and it's quite different from the idea of animation. So the idea of animation is that you have a timeline and you decide how big is the work, how long is the work. So let's say I'm making a 10-minute HD animation. That's how you start an animation project. And you have a timeline and there's a beginning and an ending. And when you make something that's scripted, it's a very different frame of mind. You're really thinking about movement in a different way. So here we see a work called Floating Form, floatingform.com. And as you can see, there's the standard browser items where you fill out your information. Like any web page where you sign up for something or you buy something and you share your email. Those are called form items. And so Michael Manning, an artist from California, he took those elements and sort of removed their function and just made a script to make them move around, which doesn't make any sense for a form. Like, why would a form move around? But they're still functional. You see, I could click on the email form and it auto-filled from my browser. Hi, Michael Manning. And I can submit the form if I manage to hit the button. And then it just restarts. So I've always been interested in removing functionality from the internet, so we sort of look at it in a different way. This work is quite well known by Lialina. She has been working with the internet since the mid-90s, and in this work she's been trying to recreate the sort of low loading speed of the internet that we were used to in the mid-90s. Now that everything's become fast, everything loads instantaneously. So what she did is she took the separate frames of an animated GIF and spread them out over different servers. So a lot of artists, me and Jan Robert and other people, were all hosting one frame. And because every time you have to call another server, there's a delay. That means that the movement of this animated GIF is slowed down and unpredictable. So you see it's stuck a little bit, and then it continues, and then it gets stuck. And this is what I mean where the computer influences the movement. It's a particular kind of movement that is different from traditional moving image media. This is a work by Jonas Lund. He's an artist based in Berlin. And the work is called What You See Is What You Get, which is a reference to the whole difference between hard coding or working in a visual environment. And what you see here are all these rectangles that represent the different browser sizes of people. So here you might see a portrait-oriented, it's probably a phone, and here you see someone who has a browser like mine. So he's recording everyone's browser size, which there's an element of surveillance, but there's also the element, which I've always thought was very interesting, is how do you think of composition in a browser? Composition is a thing in any medium, is a starting point. What is the size of my canvas? What is the size of the piece of marble for the sculpture? How big will the sculpture be? How long will the video be? And on the internet, it's very different. When you make a browser scripted work, you don't know what the size is, you don't know what the duration is, and this work is recording the unpredictability of the size of the internet. So the internet basically doesn't have a fixed size. It doesn't have a size. So we, as artists, we have to anticipate that, and that's an interesting problem, that we don't have control how a viewer sees the work. This is a work called Hamburgers by Guthrie Lonergan, an artist based in Los Angeles. It's kind of interactive. I wanted this show to be mostly non-interactive works, but I think this also works as a non-interactive. And just as an anecdote, I remember Guthrie came to Berlin in 2009, and a lot of internet artists were based in Berlin at the time, and he hadn't been to Europe that much, and he was so happy to find out about cafes and that you could just go in a cafe and sort of have this leisure lifestyle. But he also remarked that the McDonald's hamburgers tasted beefier in Germany. They were slightly better in his eyes. So even though the product is so standardized, there are different standards in different countries, and he's a big fan of McDonald's. His work deals a lot with internet banality or the mundaneness. Internet pioneers Jody made this work called Tide. Jody are known for hacking systems and making sort of the aesthetics of code as close to the system as possible. And they made a website called x20xx.com, and it has a bunch of quick internet tests. Like I think some of their projects are more robust or long form, and here they just made a lot of small web pages. I don't mean small, like a web page doesn't have a size, and I don't think that a work that is less work is therefore a smaller work. But they're quicker, more spontaneous, and I've always been interested in the internet being a place for innocent thoughts where you haven't thought it through all the while, and there's a lot of intuition where a lot of if you get a museum show, you might think for a long time to do an important project and that you can defend it. And here I'm not 100% sure what the script is. I looked at the source code. I wasn't sure. The title is Tide, so I imagine it has something to do with ebb and flow and the ocean. And we see a blue field, and we see sort of two shapes that remind you of a buoy, but it probably also has to do something with time. And I don't know if that's the time of my local computer or the time of their server, but I thought this work really fit this show in this idea of infinity and things happening in a scripted way and in a calm way, and a sort of the way I see scripted movement is that it's like a waterfall, so or a fountain that it continues to move. It's always moving. It doesn't stop, but it doesn't repeat exactly. This is a work by Claudia Mate. She's based in London, and we see a group of emoji that are rotating in a three-dimensional space. And the whole piece gives me a sense of breathing, that there's a cycle of breathing. You're breathing in and out, and you're getting pulled in, and then you're getting pushed out. And I thought that this was a very... In my research of screensavers, I came across a lot of screensavers that work with this idea of a tube. Just to explain a little bit, it's very hard for a computer to move every pixel on the screen at the same time. So if you imagine you have an animation program and you have a very big photo and you just want it to move from left to right. So you only see part of the photo and you want the photo to pan. That is very taxing on the CPU if you want to do that in real time. So throughout the history of the computer, throughout the history of video games, there's been all kinds of tricks to create the illusion that everything is moving at the same time, but actually only small parts of the screen are moving. So this is an example where it feels like it's completely overwhelming movement and everything is moving and you're floating in a space where every pixel is alive, but actually there's not that much movement in each frame. And that's part of what fascinates me of this piece. And then if you refresh, you'll see that I'm just refreshing the browser now. If you pay attention, every emoji is in a different location every time you refresh. So that kind of unpredictability is very interesting to me, that this is like a living entity that will never repeat. Continuing on. So the interface here was an interface based on the work of Constant Dullard of a previous online show where all the works are seen next to each other. sort of like a museum wall with description texts. And here we have his work, Waving Ocean. So Constant has been investigating Photoshop filters in the form of lenticular works. And in this case, he took a sort of serene image of an open ocean and then applied the waving filter from Photoshop. So this is an animated GIF placed full screen in a domain name. And it is a loop, but at the same time, I thought it fit the show because it is a very computational movement. It's something that is a paradigm from early decisions made by an Adobe team, and then I don't think it was meant to literally create an ocean, and then he applied it to the photo of an ocean. So it really creates a sort of deadpan, ridiculous simulation of an ocean. That's maybe what attracts me to this piece is that on the computer, obviously you can create very high-res video of anything in the world and create things that are hyper-real, but sometimes doing the opposite, just taking a still and animating it in a deadpan way actually gives a more serene feeling than seeing a realistic video of an ocean. That's something that's always attracted me about the computer, of creating things that are very different from the real world, but that create the sensation of something that you remember from the real world. This is a website called Scrollbar Composition by Jan Robert Leegte, also based in Amsterdam. And he took the idea of the computer interface and the defaults that are part of the system, in this case scroll bars, and using those as material. So you can think traditionally about things like arte povera and thinking, oh, we're going to use scraps of materials that are around the studio. And I think this work, and also Floating Form by Michael Manning, are examples of the equivalent of arte povera in the browser. And what are the standard elements in the browser that everyone is sort of using every day, but not really thinking about. And here he's isolating the idea of a frame set and scroll bars, and they're sort of pointlessly jumping up and down. And this to me really embodies the idea of all the time we spend online, and then 4 hours later, like, what happened? I don't even know what I was doing. Evan Roth is based in Berlin, and this is a work called When We Were Kings. It plays with elements of the game Solitaire that we know from Windows and early versions. And it's again similar to Claudia Mate's piece, a piece that uses sort of a scripted movement. I don't know if this is a sine or a cone sign or what the formula is for this movement. And this idea of you only have a few images, so as far as file size, it's very small, but you start stacking those images on top of each other, and they start moving around and create these sort of strange tubes. So you can just leave this running for a long time and it will start filling up the screen completely, and there's a random element, so it will never really be the same. Again, it's like a fountain or a waterfall. This is a piece of mine that you can look at money growing. I won't dive into this too much. I'm not supposed to put my own work in a curated show that I curated, so shame on me. This is a piece by Cloud Kloski. It's kind of a nonsensical chess game, and I don't play chess that much, but I was attracted to the idea that in an alternate universe, this is possible. I don't think this is possible within the chess rules. The other player would have to move as well. But I think the whole theme of this show is this sort of observation without judgment and being in a mindset where things just go and you kind of stop thinking. I don't want to use the word stoned, but maybe that's a good description of that state of mind. Here's a work by Monica and Jonathan Puckey. They're a studio based in Amsterdam, 3 people, and this is a project called All the Minutes. It's a Twitter clock. So when you think about a clock, something that indicates the time, this is a clock that constantly scrapes the internet, scrapes Twitter. So every time someone tweets something with 9:16 a.m., which is the time on my computer right now, it'll show a tweet related with that time. So as time goes by, if you look at this at 3 p.m., a lot of people are like, oh, I'm still in bed. Or this person hasn't been able to sleep. It's 9 a.m. and unable to sleep, insomnia. It's 9 a.m. and I'm craving pasta. So it kind of, it's a clock that shows you the state of mind of the world. And then we have this piece by Peter Luining. There are a lot of Dutch artists here. I have to disclose that this started as a research of net art in the Netherlands, and I think because of the grant system in the Netherlands, there's been a whole bunch of experimentation online. The Netherlands is not such a market-driven art culture, and so that's why you might see a lot of Dutch artists. This piece is called Cursor Noise, and I think the idea of default noise to a medium is interesting. So we know television noise and we know noise on the radio. And in this case, he took the idea of the mouse cursor being sort of the 0.0 of the computer. And then when you take that 0.0 and just spread it all across the screen, it's very confusing. And if you think of the mouse cursor as your avatar, as being you on the screen, and you telling the computer where you are, then once you fill the screen with mouse cursors, you're kind of lost in the crowd. So I thought that was a beautiful moment of thinking about the computer in that way, of losing your identity, because there's infinite copies of you and you don't know where you are. Let's see. This is the navigation. I think we covered everything. Here's an about the show, so you can read my press release and my comments here, and the press release by the gallery. And all the gallery works are here, all the artist works. So everybody, while you're at home under quarantine, wishing you all the best and hope you stay healthy and happy. And this is what we have to offer for you right now. Thank you.